As I already said, flirting is all about playing with sexual energy. So it's really about how do we tap into our sexual instinct when we're interacting with somebody we're attracted to. So basically, when we're looking at the influence of the instincts on flirting, we shouldn't really think of what is our dominant instinct, but we should rather think of how strongly does our sexual instinct show up. The social and the self-preservation instinct also play a role, but it's only secondary. And again, we should not look at just the instincts separately. I mean, we always need to look at them in conjunction with the types. But of course, let's try in this video to really focus on some of the peculiarities of these instincts. Now, as I said, it's all about the sexual instinct and how the sexual instinct shows up in the flirting. So of course, this video will focus on that instinct. But I would like to divide it basically in 3 blocks of how we'll be talking and discussing the sexual instinct. The first block is about how we try to be attractive in order to be seen. The second one is how we are attracted to others. And the third thing is how do we act on this attraction. So let's start with the first block, being attracted in order to be seen. And before we really start, maybe we should go back a little bit into nature. What happens during mating season? Basically, animals undergo some kind of physical metamorphosis. The feathers become brighter, their colors become brighter, they're really trying to impress potential mates, they're really trying to show their natural beauty, just as a way of showing their strength and their genetic health. And as a matter of fact, humans do something similar. When women ovulate, so when they're basically fertile, and research has shown this, women tend to use more makeup in order to highlight the facial features that actually show that they have good genetic health. And they're also wearing more attractive clothes in order to be more seen. Now, there's one difference between animals and humans. Animals only show their strong genetic health during moments of fertility. But we humans actually try to do that the whole year round. Why? Well, basically humans don't have a mating season. Because for animals, it's pretty clear when the females are fertile. But in the human species, you don't really see it. There is this kind of invisible ovulation. So how does this show up the whole year round? Well, for women, they really put a lot of care in how they look, how they dress. They may use lots of fragrances to somehow exaggerate the sexual pheromones that are there. Some women are actually going to wear a shirt or a dress with a deep cleavage, or they may wear a push-up bra just to give the impression that they have bigger breasts. Some women are going to wear higher heels in order to be more visible. So basically they're going to do anything that may highlight their sexual desirability. They will do anything that is going to catch the eye, the way that they're going to look sexy. It's highlighting body parts. It's basically anything that may arouse interest or desire from somebody else. But it's not only women who do that. Men do the same. Also, men will try to dress in an attractive manner. They want to be seen. Also, men are using perfumes in order to exaggerate these pheromones and in order to give an imitation of this very strong genetic health. Many men actually go to the gym not because they want to be healthy. No, they just want to have an impressive body. They want to have nice muscles so that they can really show off. Men may actually groom. They're going to take care of their beard, their hair, and so on. And they may also show all kinds of bravado, strength, knowledge, power, money, and so on. So it's very important to understand that whereas in animals it's very much about the physical attractiveness and the strength, that for humans it's not only about that. Being attractive goes much beyond that, and this is where the types actually come in. Because, for example, type 5 may try not to just be attractive to through their clothes. I mean, some may do, some may not, but they really try to display that they possess some kind of exclusive knowledge, and this is what may make them attractive. Trees, for example, may want to be more attractive and desirable just by showing off their status and some kind of symbols of wealth. And another thing in this context is basically that what makes someone attractive is also very much determined by the culture. I mean, for example, I was talking about the push-up bra, right? Indeed, in our mainstream Western culture, a push-up bra may indeed be used in order to look more attractive. But in some of the subcultures, this would be somehow repulsive, and they're not going to use that. It's not going to do the trick. Another thing about the sexual instinct is that people who have a very strong sexual instinct, they actually find themselves beautiful. But there's also some who do not. I mean, some want to be attractive just by being interesting, delightful, fun, or charming. Now, I was mainly speaking about being attractive through the physical appearance and maybe by showing some signs of attractiveness, but there's something else. There is also the radiation of their presence. It's also about somehow displaying themselves. Now, what is this radiation? Basically, this radiation is some kind of power to attract. It's the ability to get attention. It is some kind of charisma that some people have. It's really like when somebody comes into the room and everybody just turns to them. So actually, people may not necessarily be physically beautiful, but somehow they attract us with their energy. They radiate some kind of energy that we're all noticing. So quite often, or most likely, people with a strong sexual instinct are actually convinced that they are attractive. They just know, they are convinced about themselves, they are convinced that they really broadcast this energy. And it actually works because self-confidence is something that's very attractive. And we're all interested in somebody who looks very confident because that is some kind of sign of strength. Because also, I mean, imagine if you feel that if you're not convinced that you're attractive, then nobody else is actually going to find you attractive. So, a strong sexual instinct really wants to visibly seen, they want to radiate their energy, and actually they want to constantly be seen. They want to constantly be attractive. So quite often, people with a strong sexual instinct may just to flirt, and they want the other to flirt back, not because they really want to have a sexual relationship with somebody. No, it's more about getting some kind of affirmation. They want to get some kind of validation. They just want to get the feeling that they are attractive, that they are desirable. Now, it's not only about being attractive or about being desirable. It goes actually further. It's a pretty competitive thing because it's about being more interesting than others, more beautiful than others, more attractive than others, more desirable than others. But an interesting side remark that needs to be made is that people with a strong sexual instinct do not always want to be seen as very attractive. Sometimes they may actually do the opposite. Sometimes they may be conscious of situations where they actually do not want to be attractive. Imagine the case of a woman who's going to the gym and she really wants to work out. And she does not want to she doesn't want to catch the eye of all the men. So actually she may decide to try to dress down in order not to have all the unwanted attention. So actually, understanding that you may get unwanted attention is also part of this sexual instinct. Of course, there are many women who actually want to catch the attention in the gym, and many of them may not want to admit to that. Now, on the other side, people with a weak sexual instinct, they actually don't really care that much, and they may actually be more skeptical about this whole desire of dressing up. And it's not that they don't want to get the validation. I mean, they want to get it, but they're somehow out of touch with this need. They quite often don't want to admit it, and they just think that it's somehow just gross or cheap to want to look attractive. The reality is that they want to be noticed, but they just don't know how they can be attractive. They don't know what it takes to look sexy. They don't know what it takes to look attractive. They just don't know what makes themselves beautiful, and they just don't know how they need to dress in order to transform themselves into some kind of sexual human being. The other thing with people who are sexually blind is that quite often they don't even notice that somebody actually finds them attractive. And sometimes they may even be oblivious when somebody's flirting with them. They quite often just don't catch these signals. And people with a very weak sexual instinct also don't really radiate this sense of self-confidence. On the contrary, they may feel unattractive, and they may have a self-image of being not really confident. And this is really passing on a message to other people. The second block of the sexual instinct is about being attracted to somebody. And it's not only about being aware of who you're attracted to, but also being aware of who you are not attracted to. So people with a strong sexual instinct are very, very much attuned and very much feeling what their desires are. So when they see somebody who's attractive, they immediately know that this is the person they want to meet. There is no gray zone. So when they see somebody, they either want to meet that person or they do not want to meet that person. And quite often they have this kind of very deep connection that they somehow feel instantaneously. So quite often they can have this feeling that the person that they just met, as if they have known this person like forever. Now on the other side, people with a very weak sexual instinct have more difficulties with really identifying who they like and what the ideal partner would look like. So quite often they need to spend some time with a person actually to understand if this is a person they like or not, if this is a person that they want to get to know or not. So the sexual attraction is not going to be the driving force of their interaction with a person they may like. Of course, the sexual attraction may actually follow after a deeper emotional connection has been built, but it takes some time to build that up. And now the final block of the sexual instinct is about acting upon our attraction. People with a strong sexual instinct initiate flirting rather easily. So they try to create some kind of bubble. They are using all their energy, all their resources, just as if there is no tomorrow. I mean, they're taking risks, they can do irrational things sometimes, and they don't really think about the consequences. So they can be pretty passionate and intense in their flirting. They also use quite often very long, prolonged eye contact. And quite often they really feel some kind of very strong emotional rush when they're in contact with the person that they feel attracted to. In this acting upon the attraction, they also tend to idealize the other person very much, and they set some kind of high standards of who they think this person actually is. And of course, unfortunately, this kind of idealization can quite often be delusional and lead to some kind of sobering moments afterwards. But in the moment, they are really convinced that this is how the person is. Another thing in the way that they act upon this attraction is that they can be very competitive and they can be very focused on the goal, basically. So you could actually say that quite often people with a strong sexual instinct are not really flirting, but they're really more trying to seduce. People with a strong sexual instinct also tend to be rather jealous. If they see that their partner is giving some attention to somebody else, they can be pretty intolerant to that, and they can really demand some kind of exclusivity. But on the other side, there are quite some people with a strong sexual instinct who actually find themselves flirting with others, even if they're in a committed relationship. And this is most often people who have this social instinct as the second one, of course. Now, people who have the sexual instinct as their second instinct, they are going to flirt with somebody they are attracted to, but it's not going to be as intense. It's going to come out more naturally, and it's not going to be as overdone. And then when we get to a very weak or a repressed sexual instinct, basically, and especially those that are self-pressed dominant, as we will see, these people tend to be quite bad at flirting. I mean, very often they just don't get it. And even if their partner is asking, like, can you please flirt a little bit? I mean, can you at least try? It really feels like acting to them. They don't like it. So their flirting quite often is going to be a little bit mechanical. They do not have the playfulness and flexibility that real flirting actually requires. And sometimes they can actually feel uncomfortable when somebody's trying to flirt with them, and they can defend themselves from flirting. Now, this does not mean that people who are sexual blind don't flirt at all, or that they're not interested in it. It's just that they tend to play less with sexual energy. They may really have a very pragmatic and a very strategic approach in terms of meeting a person and trying to set up a relationship, but you don't have this sexual playfulness in it. So quite often they may be very good at creating a bond, a caring relationship that can really last for a very long time. Now, it's important to remember that whatever I'm saying here really applies to people in our modern day Western industrialized society, because people who come from a very religious background or have sexually repressed values may be very different in the way that they are engaging with people they are attracted to. Quite often these people may have some kind of internal battle. I mean, from one side they are aware of their attraction, but from the other side, due to their sex negative values, they feel as if being sexually attracted and attractive is something bad. They may feel that it's somehow wrong to be attracted to somebody. So sometimes these people, in order not to be tempted, they may try to make themselves unappealing. They may really dress down. They may try to dress in such a way that other people are not going to attach too much, they're not really going to notice them. They may do things in order to push other people away and make sure that nobody's attracted to them. So very often people in sexually repressed environments are actually actively fighting against their own sexual instinct. Before I end this section on the sexual instinct, there's two more remarks that I want to make. The first one is that people who have a repressed sexual instinct, I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't have this instinct at all. I mean, it is there. It is just that it is not developed. It's not trained. They're not skilled at using it. So it actually may get activated. I mean, as I already said before, the sexual instinct may get activated when we meet somebody that we really like. I mean, when we're in a stage of our life where we're really actively looking for a partner. And in those cases, indeed, the sexual instinct may get activated, but still it's not going to be the same as somebody who has a dominant sexual instinct. It may get activated, but they're going to use the instinct in a less skilled manner, actually. The second remark that I wanted to make is with regards to subtypes. I mean, we all know that there are 3 subtypes in each of the types, and that there is a huge differentiation between them. And this also applies in terms of flirting. But for some types, this differentiation is very big, and for other subtypes, the differentiation is not that big. And here I want to make a very interesting observation. In the cases where the counter type of a specific type is actually the sexual dominant, then there is going to be a huge difference between the sexual subtype and the 2 other subtypes. So here I'm talking about types 1, 5, and 6. So basically for these types, the sexual subtype will be very different from the self-pres and the social 1, 5 and 6. I mean, just try to think about that a little bit. The energetic qualities of types 1, 5 and 6 are very, very different from the energetic qualities of the sexual instinct. I mean, for example, if we're looking at the energy of type 1, it's really striving to be contained and in control. Whereas the sexual instinct, it's all about being uncontrolled. If we're looking at type 5, there the energy of the type is about trying to be very separate and unnoticed, but the sexual instinct actually wants to be seen, wants to be attractive, wants to merge. Same thing with type 6. The energy of type 6 is actually, it wants to be free from intensity. It does not want to see any polarity, for example, whereas a sexual instinct is all about playing with polarity. It's all about intensity. So this is why we will see a huge variation between them. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, we have 3 types where the difference is going to be less pronounced, and these are the more assertive types, so types 3, 7 and 8. If we're going to look at the sexual 8, for example, yes, they may be even more intense and assertive than the self-pres or the social 8s, but still there's not going to be this energetic difference. Basically, I would say that here the energetic qualities of the type enforce the energetic qualities of the sexual instinct. So, of course, this means that from all the subtypes, from all the 27, the sexual 7, the sexual 3 and the sexual 8 are going to be the most assertive, the most active in terms of flirting and actually seducing. And then finally we have types 2, 4 and 9. They're somewhere in the middle. I mean, there are differences, but it's not as strong. So basically you could say that the sexual blind may be a little bit more timid. Now let's move to the self-preservation instinct. There are 2 very important and very relevant characteristics of the self-preservation instinct when it comes to flirting, and these are conservation of energy and the desire to stay within the safe and comfortable environment. And actually, if we think about that, these are really the opposite of what is required in playing with sexual energy. So basically, we can also say that a strong self-preservation instinct is actually going to exacerbate the impact of a weak sexual instinct. So what does that mean? Well, conserving energy means that a person is going to be less active. The person is going to spend less time, less energy, less money, less resources. It also means that the person is going to be less assertive. And this desire to stay in a safe environment means that the people will be more homey, so they will go less to places where they can hang out and meet new people. So they're not going to feel that much at ease with going outside of their comfort zone and take the initiative. So people with a strong self-preservation instinct also may actually prefer comfortable clothing over attractive clothing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like attractive clothing, but if it's not fitting well, if it's somehow discomfortable, then they don't want it. For example, I mean, I don't wear high heels, but I've heard that it's very uncomfortable and that it's even painful. So people with a strong self-preservation instinct are less likely to be willing to cope with this discomfort of the high heels. Another thing about the self-preservation instinct and flirting or meeting a partner is that people with this strong self-pres instinct tend to be more pragmatic and down to earth. So there is going to be less of an idealization, also less of some kind of romance involved. And of course, all of this may actually increase, let's say, the awkwardness of their flirting. And quite often the flirting of a self-pres dominant person may look a little bit childlike and not really mature-like. So quite often they may look a little bit cute and innocent, but it's not really sexualized. Now, of course, on the other side, people with a repressed self-preservation instinct and in combination with a dominant sexual instinct may actually be super impulsive and they may completely lose it. Now we get to the final instinct, which is the social instinct. And if we think flirting is not only about playing with sexual energy, it's also about interacting with another person. So it's very much a social skill. And people with a strong social instinct tend to have good social skills because they're better to relate to the other person. So basically, if a social dominant person has a low sexual instinct, they may not really flirt, but they still have the social skills that are required to establish some kind of rapport with another person. And they also know how to read the reaction of the other person, so they're much more flexible in adapting. Now, an important characteristic of the social instinct is that it basically smoothens the impact of the sexual instinct. It somehow makes it a little bit more, let's say, adequate. And on the contrary, people with a weak social instinct, they're actually often unable to really read the reaction of the other person. So sometimes the flirting of somebody who's sexual dominant and social blind, this flirting can look a little bit socially awkward, and sometimes it can even be creepy. Another observation that we can make with people with a strong social instinct is that these people tend to flirt less directly. They do it more in an indirect way as part of a bigger company. So instead of separating and creating a bubble with the person of their desire and being disconnected from the rest, people with a strong social instinct try to somehow create a little subgroup within the context of a bigger group. And so people with a strong social instinct are also less likely to approach somebody they feel attracted to in a very direct manner. They're more likely going to rely on the group setting to approach somebody. They're going to feel more comfortable when they meet and they can interact with the person they like within the safe boundaries of the group. So they will also try to make sure that their crush is somehow included in the group and is going to be feeling well. So people with a strong social instinct, before they really engage in real flirting, they tend to really connect first. They try to first relate and have a connection with that person. Now, on the contrary, people who are social blind hardly ever find a partner among long-term friends. The last thing that I want to do in this video is compare the 6 different stacks or stackings. And I don't want to make a ranking of who is flirting the best and who is flirting the worst. No, because at the end of the day, there's just different approaches and different energetic intensities. So let's maybe start with social, sexual self-preservation. Now, these people are the most flirtatious of all because they're really very skilled at integrating the sexual playfulness of the sexual instinct in their social skills. So these people have really practiced their flirting skills very much, but quite often they may not be as good in sustaining stable relationships because this is a skill that they have not really practiced that much. And quite often these people are very good at being playful with more people, but they sometimes lack this very depth of a connection with the other person. The second one is sexual, social self-preservation. Now, these people are very good at making their attention known to the people that they're attracted or interested in. And they can be very good at flirting, but sometimes they may be a little bit too intense. The third is sexual, self-preservation, social. Now, these people may lack the social skills to really read their partner or the person that they're flirting with. So in a setting where it is not really clear if there is a mutuality, the flirting can look a little bit awkward. I mean, there's too much intensity but without the playfulness. And so it can really come across as creepy and even as stalkery. But in a case or in a setting where it is clear that the other side is interested in the person, and when there is some kind of reciprocity, then these people can be extremely good at playing with the sexual energy. The fourth one is self-pres, sexual, social. I mean, these people also have pretty bad social skills, and they're not very good at reading the signals of the other person. And at the same time, they're also not really taking a very active role. I mean, they have a sense of what is attractive to them, and they may really have some kind of flirting skills, but they're not really engaging enough. They're not taking enough initiative. They're not really very active. Now, the fifth one is social, self-pres, and sexual. These people, of course, because of the dominant social instinct, they may have very, very good social skills, but with sexual instinct being the last, they don't really have this playing with sexual energy. They may be out of tune with their own sexual energy, and they may also not be actually willing to spend time on that. So they hardly have situations where they meet a person and they instantaneously know, like, this is the person they want to be with. So very often these are people who are going to have a friendship that somehow evolves into a relationship, because first they connect and relate, and then only after that they take it to a next level. And then the last one is self-preservation, social, sexual. And this is probably the most challenging for flirting of all, because they are self-preservation dominant, so they are rather inactive. They're not spending too much energy, and at the same time they're sexual blind, so they don't really understand what flirting really is about. So their flirting may be the most difficult of all.